Thank you for having me. I'm Lily Filson, and this talk is really the fruit of a lot of my research over the past 10 years and counting, really, when I look back. I don't want to look back and make the exact count right now. But so this project actually connects to my recently published monograph. I have to point this way. The Renaissance Automata at the Villa Pratolino. It began with a Florence fellowship at Syracuse University, where I did my master's in Florence, and I wrote my thesis on the grottos of Pratolino. What are grottos? They were something that princes, cardinals, the very rich in the Renaissance would build for themselves in their gardens. They were artificial caves. They could be covered in shells, stalactites. They had a hydraulic engineering component. You'd find water in the grottos. You'd find fountains. And sometimes, and that's what we're going to be talking about, you'd find statues that moved. And we'll talk about how they were received and in what spirit they were created. So for the Renaissance elite, as we mentioned, being able to animate a statue, being able to imbue something with their own life. Remember, Aristotle had defined that if a living thing is capable of its own movement. So to be someone who could create a living statue to make this own movement was another articulation of power. You know, not only can you control water, the landscape, bend everything to your vision, but you can control the unseen. And when we say occult, you know, it's spooky season, we think, you know, sorcery occult, but the Renaissance definition of occult really just was used also of things that were unseen. So in a lot of the documents, they talk about the occult works of Pratolino because their workings were unseen, right? And we also talked about how, in many ways, Pratolino is reviving the myths and the themes of antiquity, right? We have Pan chasing the nymph. We had Mount Parnassus. Antiquity is a huge theme at Pratolino. And one of the linchpins of the antique experience, when you'd go to a temple in ancient Egypt, well, ancient Greek Egypt, let's say, or later Greco-Roman temples, the idea was that the cult statue was alive. You know, they were known to move. Cult statues could speak, they could bleed, they could cry. We can follow it down the line to miraculous saint statues through later centuries, but we're not going all the way down that line. But the idea of creating living gods, like a living cult statue, was another revival of antiquity that Pratolino was demonstrating that was capable under Francesco Primo de' Medici. Well, and this is the crux of my book, when it argues that Pratolino was not just fantastic garden engineering, a moment in the history of landscape architecture. It was a moment for this specific revival of antiquity. We learn quite a bit as Renaissance specialists about the revival of Greek painting traditions, the use of perspective in the Renaissance. We see the revival, although it had started much earlier, of sculpture in the round, and that naturalism from the Hellenistic Baroque. We see it in the great Renaissance sculptures as well. What we don't really hear about is the revival of ancient machinery, engineering, as well as magical philosophy, all put together in these works of art, which tragically we can't go to a museum and see anymore. So we can understand why less books have been written about this than the works in the Uffizi.